Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee of 2025, reconvened from the 16th of December because of technical issues. Before we start, please can I remind everyone that this meeting is being live streamed and the recording archived for future viewing. If a participant wishes to speak, please raise your hand if in the chamber or use the raise hand function if you're joining remotely. I will indicate when it is your turn to speak, so please then select the request to speak button, which will allow you to come on screen. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function. The chat function should only be used to highlight any technical issues or to get the attention of myself or a Democratic Services officer. Thank you very much. And moving straight into the agenda, item 1, please, can I have any apologies for absence?
Councillor Prothero and Matthew Evans, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Item 2 of the agenda is the minutes of the extraordinary meeting held on the 18th of November 2024 for correctness only. Someone prepared to move? Thank you. Seconder? Thank you. Anyone against? No, that's carried. Okay, item 3 is to receive declaration of interest and the nature of such interest under the Council's Code of Conduct. Do we have any? I want to declare a personal interest under item number 7, which is the complaints report. Obviously, I'm not going to influence or whatever. It's just a general issue I need to raise, which I've already raised anyway with Tony as an issue in regards to the complaints process. Item 4 then is the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report 24-25, referral from Cabinet to us. And I think that's you, Matt, is it? Can I just ask, and I've raised this before, and Vicky, I don't know whether it's a matter you could take back. We don't have a covering report for these referrals to us. All we get is the resolution of the Cabinet. And I'm just wondering, I've raised it before, whether we should actually have a short report asking, setting out the scene, whilst obviously we've got the Cabinet report, and, seeking what we are required to do as Governance and Audit Committee, even though it's in the resolution. My view is I think we should have a covering report, but I would welcome some view on that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's not a matter that I was aware that had been raised previously, but I'm content to take that back and have a discussion with officers and perhaps understand a little bit better what it is you might be looking for, the committee might be looking for by way of that report.
And I wonder whether, and not because I don't want to write any more reports, but I wonder whether we just, when the referral is being made, that we're a bit clear about what that referral is actually requesting, so we actually make the referral a little bit more comprehensive.
That would be great. Just a short A4 page. I don't want chapter and verse, because obviously we've got the Cabinet report, we've got the resolutions of Cabinet, and one of the resolutions it's referred to us. So it's just a little bit of background information. I think we need to get. So therefore, we've got a report that we can refer to. I
think I can understand that because it's the rationale, isn't it, around the referral being made in the first instance. Okay.
I'm happy to discuss it because I would never bring a report like this to when I was in local government. I'd always have a covering report for it. So, but it doesn't have to be War and Peace, Matt. I don't want you drafting reams of paper. We're supposed to be saving the forest, not cutting it down. So, okay, Matt, over to you.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the mid-year Treasury position. You'll all recall for a highly regulated area this is. So this report's prepared in compliance with the latest code of practice around Treasury management, which is the 2021 SIPFA code. Given the nature of the content and the subject matter, it's quite a lengthy report. Can't really apologise for that. I would like to, but there's a lot in there, but it needs to be, unfortunately. You'll be familiar with the format of these reports. We've kept that fairly continuous. So the report opens up with an economic update, so actually detailing the factors that were driving the UK economy during the period under review, so up to the half year. So that period of sort of low growth, relatively higher interest rates, but seeing inflation starting to come down towards the Treasury targets. There's also in that section an analysis of interest rate forecasts from December 2024 on for the next 3 years, so through to March 2027. Just in then common headings, Treasury Management Strategy Review. So there have been no policy changes in the first half of the year. But of course, we do have the MRP policy later on the agenda this afternoon. Then generally around accounts capital expenditure and our potential indicators that are set out in Appendix 1. So the Treasury Management potential indicators are based on the Q2 capital monitoring, and that was reported in detail to Cabinet on the 28th of November. The council's required to raise £30.37 million in new loans to finance the capital programme 2024-5, and the majority of that is around the housing development programme. All of as I've just mentioned, actually, Appendix 1 provides a real detailed summary of the current potential indicators and the outlook for the next few years as well. There are no areas really of, whilst it's a lengthy report, there's nothing of major concern in here, but there's one issue I just need to raise, and that's following advice from our Treasury advisors. All new loans have been borrowed over a shorter term, as interest rates are forecast to fall over the medium-long term. So that's temporarily resulted as breaching our maturity structure of borrowing Treasury indicator in the 5 and 10 year range, and that's in Section 9, Table 11 in Appendix 1, and that's a totally appropriate and prudent course of action to have taken. Just then on the investment portfolio, and conscious this is always a snapshot in time, so at the 30th of September investments were £15 million down from the end of year position at 31st of March 2024. But interestingly, interest was being earned at an average rate of 5.26%, so a healthy rate of interest being earned, and there was 872k actually pounds and pence during that period, and obviously that's helping our revenue budget position. The borrowing strategy, there's been new external borrowing during the first 6 months of the year, just £15 million, and that's been an average of 4.12%. And that gives some prominence to that 5.26% where we've been earning on our investments. Due to the current high borrowing costs, as I just mentioned, with that technical breach, we are borrowing over a shorter period of time, and certainly not any longer than 7 years at the moment. PWB, we have repaid some maturing debt during the first 6 months of the year, and that's just a touch over £7 million at an average of 4.84%. All the borrowing, and this isn't surprising, during that being the major component of our capital programme and borrowing, all the borrowing this year has been in respect of the HRA, the Housing Revenue Account, and there's a positive around that in that there's a preferential rate with the PWLB, so there's a 60 basis point deduction. So the standard PWLB rate is normally 1% over gilts, so there's a 40 basis points over only on the HRA borrowing. External debt is slightly up at £147 million from 143 that it was at the end of the year, and the external interest, an average rate of 4.34%, £3 million spent on those loans during the first 6 months. That's all on that section. Then just to finish, debt rescheduling, no opportunities for any debt rescheduling, so none undertaken. So that's all I was going to say in terms of introduction.
Thank you, Matt, for that. Any questions? No questions? Councillor Hooper?
Thank you, Chair. And it's less about the figures, Matt. It's more about the advisors, and I'd just be interested at what point do we review the advisors? What sort of a cycle are they on? Because I didn't notice it in the report, and I'm just interested more broadly. Thank you.
So apologies, I should know this, but I'm going to have to ask Jem to come in and give me a hand on the term of the arrangement and contract that we currently have. So thank you, Gemma.
Okay, thank you, Matt. So we're actually due to go out to tender again for our advisors this summer. So we had an initial 3-year contract and we've extended for a further 2 years, which was part of the original agreement. And now we need to go back out to tender July, August time this year.
Thank you for that, Gemma. I've got a question, Matt, in regards to the similar point Councillor Hooper's made there. It's in the final bullet point to your Cabinet report, which says the Council has maturing the Public Works Loan Board and other maturing debt totalling 7.953 million during 24-25 due to prevailing high interest rates. No decisions to refinance has yet been made to date. Okay. So obviously Cabinet agreed that in whenever it agreed it, 28th November. Okay. And the point I think you've just made is that you've now got advice from the Treasury advisors to do a technical breach of your provisions. Yeah. And in the circumstances, it's prudent to obviously borrow short term over the period. So are we saying we've got no authority yet from the council to make that? So you'll be putting a report to the council to say they were going to breach the policy, technically, to do the short-term borrow or longer-term borrow because of the interest rates. And if that's the case, when will that be going to council or cabinet? Because one of the recommendations, subject to what committee would say here, is that I think I would certainly support that to assist you if it's going to go somewhere else. So if we can get the support of this committee to say we're content with the technical breach, given the specific circumstances, and then it goes somewhere else, because currently I would have thought you've got no authority to do it, have you?
So we wouldn't. What I'm reporting to you is that we have, and that's what standard practice would be, and it's been done for good reason. I wouldn't come and seek authority in advance. I think I just might bring Gemma back in on the timing of the borrowing we're undertaking during the course.
All I'm concerned about is your breaching policy with no authority.
Chair, we are doing a revised Treasury management strategy to reflect the 24-25 position. As part of that, we're hoping to mop up a number of issues, and one of those is the IFRS 16 implications, which we're currently working through at the moment. We'll also be factoring in hopefully the kind of MRP changes, and we would also be picking this up as well. I completely accept what you're saying about the fact that it needs to go to council, and that will be going to council in March, and probably hindsight should have gone to council in December, so we've gone earlier. I think some of it is around process. So I think in terms of setting those performance indicators, I don't think enough thought has been, and I take this on, within our team, I don't think enough thought and forward planning has been taken in to kind of reflect where that borrowing is likely to fall in order to give us enough headroom when setting those prudential indicators. So, I mean, certainly it's not, we haven't breached our kind of authorised borrowing limit or our operational borrowing limit, but you're absolutely right. We do set those performance indicators for a reason, prudential indicators for a reason. But we would be looking to pick that up as part of the March council report.
Yeah, thanks. I wasn't trying to be awkward here. Okay? All I was saying is what I don't want is, if I picked it up, is that we are seen as acting ultra vires as a council outside your powers and your policies. So the only point I was going to suggest is that subject committee agreeing that we would support that process in any event if we're going to go to council. So you get that from us to say we support it. Given and again the chart sets out the interest rates. I think at some stage it was something like 4.3 and 4.2, and it's going to go down to 4.1. And you want to get the best interest rates possible for this amount of money. So that's the only point I wanted to make. Councillor Goodjohn.
Yeah, I just wanted to check. I think it's making sure we know where the line is in responsibilities. At the end of the day, the civil servants and the Section 106 officer has the responsibility over the finances and reports back to us if there's overspend, any kind of breaches of policy. We don't ask them to come back to us if they're overspending on the budget, for example, immediately to have authorization. They tell us afterwards, we've gone over budget because we have to deliver these services, and then we scrutinise that. So I'd love clarification on what specifically the rules are around when they need approval from council, or just for their local, for their responsible cabinet member to be aware of the situation and authorising it. So I don't think there's been any kind of breach of rules from my understanding of the Constitution, but perhaps coming back and saying we've just checked the rules and that there's been no kind of breach of our powers here.
Yeah, and certainly outside of here now this afternoon, Gemma and I will have a discussion about how we would deal with similar in the future.
And again, your policy can be amended to give you that delegation or that discretion. But if it's fixed, you've got some issues, haven't you, really? But I take on board what Councillor Goodjohn says. I just raise it as a matter that we've moved, haven't we? We've moved from this report to the Treasury advisors saying do it over a longer term. So that's okay. Are there any other questions? Any comments? No. Okay. So the recommendations primarily are that it's be referred to us for consideration and discussion, subject to what members have said. We need to know the contents of the report, and I would, if possible, just like the clarification on the issue about the policy and the terms of it in regards to technical breaches or otherwise. Someone supposed, yeah, thank you. Someone prepared to move then recommendations? Thank you. Seconder, thank you. Anyone against? Councillor Norman, did you want to say something?
No, sorry, just apologising, Chair, for my lateness of joining.
Oh, okay, no worries. Thank you very much. No worries. Okay, no, anyone against? No, that one's carried. Thank you very much. Next one is the Audit Wales Financial Sustainability Review of Vale Glamorgan Council, July 24. And again, another referral from the Scrutiny Committee with no covering report. So it's those issues I think we just picked up at some stage. Is Samantha doing this or Sam? Oh, you are, Matt. Okay. Over to you.
Yeah, and with Audit Wales, my understanding is when they issue a report, they'll typically come and present it to one committee at the council. So they've been to corporate performance and resources already. So you'll
fully aware of that, and I'm fully aware because I've spoken to Audit Wales about it. Those I'm not happy with it, but because given we're the Governance and Audit Committee, I thought maybe we're responsible for the assurance of this process. But I hear what they say, hear what the officers say, and we'll live with it for the time being.
Yeah. Okay. I shall see from the report, this was a thematic review covering all 22 Welsh councils, and the initial reports were specific to individual councils, with the later report to come and cover the whole of Wales. Our report was finalised back in September, and at that time the national report expected to follow sometime in December. it's natural that we wanted to report in a timely fashion, so we took it to Corporate Performance Resources at the earliest possible opportunity, and then on here. Timing's a great thing, isn't it? We've obviously, ideally today, we'd have both in front of us now, but that the national report is going to Corporate Performance Resources next week initially. I'm sure you'll get opportunity to talk about it here as well if possible. I will mention a couple of things from the national report, even though it's not on the agenda, but I think it's relevant to mention them this afternoon. Obviously, it's a very in-depth piece of work that commenced all the way back in March. We had an initial discussion at that time with Audit Wales on the brief, and then we completed quite a comprehensive documentary evidence request, set out budget reports, monitoring reports, initial reshaping programme reports, budget working groups, benchmark training, the whole lot, and they had that from us early April. We did turn that around quite quickly. Then there were a series of interviews, myself, Chief Exec, Leader, and that was April, early May. And then we had the draft report end of July, and that was finalised towards the end of August. So quite a lengthy process, and that tail end of that was where we were agreeing on the management responses. To be quite frank, there weren't any real surprises in the report, and broadly we were content with the recommendations. We did raise some concerns with the audit team around the lack of context, and that was certainly when speaking to my counterparts with other councils, they were of the same mind, and that was fed back to Audit Wales from a number of colleagues. And I think the bit that was really missing from the context of the report was that how we've had to rely on a series year on year of 1 year funding settlements, and that really doesn't support effective financial planning. But then moving on to the areas that they raised with us and the recommendations, certainly it's the case that council's budget setting, whilst attempting to recognise all the pressures across the medium term, only typically balances the budget in year one. So we're very mindful of the pressures we're facing and set out what those are and forecasting those, but we don't certainly balance the budget over a multi-year period, and that is quite a challenge when you don't know what a large, 2/3 of your major revenue sources are going to be in terms of the grant settlement from Welsh Government. But of course, as you'll have seen from the work the council's doing on its reshaping programme and the reshaping prospectus that was published through Cabinet in October, we are looking around reshaping, transforming services over the medium term, and we're looking to reflect that in our financial planning as well. The other thing that was raised in the report, and we recognise, is that the performance and finances are on different reporting cycles. So actions are in place to bring these closer together. That was something on our agenda in any case, and we'd certainly had plans to start including non-financial data in our quarterly monitoring reports. And you may have seen that that's commenced in the half-year revenue monitoring that went to Cabinet at the end of November and has gone on to the scrutiny meetings, and there's some further actions around that as well. As I said in the initial intro, the Cross Wales report was published on the 5th of December, and it's on the agenda of the next Corporate Performance Resources meeting. In all fairness, the national picture is very similar to the one that we're experiencing locally, albeit there are some Welsh authorities who are experiencing significant challenges in the short, not just the medium and longer term. And it was good to see in the full Wales report there was greater context provided on the period of some of those factors and challenges that have been affecting us. So the sustained periods of financial pressure that we've experienced, going back all the way to 2008 as local authorities, and also the challenges we've faced across the whole of that period on demand, and certainly more recently on inflation as well. So some of those factors are picked out in more detail in the national report, which was good to see. So that's all I was saying in terms of introduction.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions? No? Oh, Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair. Matt, I'm interested in, I think now you've got the national picture, what good looks like in regard to the references that have been put to this council. So do we have an understanding? Is it just that it's about multi-year settlements? Is it about more money, the nuts and bolts of this? Or is there something else? So there's something else that they've identified in the main report. I know we haven't got that in front of us at the moment, but given that you've referenced it, I'd be interested.
Yeah, I think the main difference nationally, this is literally, there were a handful of councils where there were some indication of balance in the budget in future years of their plans. So that was referenced in the summary to those individual councils. I think when you started to dig a little bit deeper into that, often quite high level and thematic. So you wouldn't see a savings programme for years 2, 3, 4, 5 of the medium-term financial plan that looked anything like the same level of detail as the immediate year in question, but a sort of guide movement towards where those savings would be found. So that would be the main difference. Yeah.
Matt, do you know if every council in Wales, 22 of them, had recommendation 1?
I suspect they probably did, but I couldn't confirm that.
That's okay. I think they did, but I don't know whether Sam's online, whether she confirm or not, but it's interesting, isn't it? That everyone gets the recommendation 1, so there is a real issue which needs to be addressed. So the only problem is they don't give you the golden bullet to address it. So that's that. If there are no questions, any comments? Councillor Goodjohn?
Yeah, thanks. And I would be quite worried if our Section 151 officer had been spending all of their time reading through every other council's document rather than paying attention to our own. So I'm glad about that. No, I think there's some serious things that we can do with this report, however generic it might be. I think there's serious improvements that can be made to the budgeting process. I think the understanding of what makes a process like this open can be changed. Just because there is a report to Cabinet every couple of months on an issue, just because you can raise questions on an issue doesn't necessarily make it an open process. I think making more of a debate out of it that can continue over the course of an entire year rather than everything coming together at that last meeting and having a large council meeting, traditional parliamentary style debate over it. We could have a more progressive, a more respectful debate over it in the long term. And I think there are some real opportunities to do that. I think if we were given more options in future, I think the budgeting process at the moment stands. There's quite a lot that's hidden behind those reports that you have to squeeze out. And I don't necessarily mean writing more and more in pages of what has occurred during the budgeting process, but some more information about the reasons why certain decisions were made would be particularly interesting. Why was that saving focused on? Why were other savings rejected over the budgeting process? And it gives us more room to be able to question the thought process behind that. Would be particularly helpful. And I don't necessarily mean that in a formal scrutiny committee meeting. I know that can be very difficult with the length of agendas, but having more options available to us, more information about the reasoning rather than the raw facts of the matter afterwards. Because at the moment, I think that a lot of people will read the final report, will read the final draft that go to scrutiny, and will take it as that is our hard and fast decision as to what we are going to do. And you can complain about it or you can support it. No in between, no alternatives, that kind of thing. And that leads to more confrontation later down the line in the budgeting process. So any more constructive dialogue that we can have would be very positive. And I think giving more options available to us and more of a behind the scenes look of what was considered and what was rejected would be helpful. Thank you.
Just a couple of words, I guess, just to manage expectations a little bit, and I won't say too much about this year's budget setting process, but if I look back to last year and the sort of £7.5 million programme of savings that we ended up with, it's fair to say we don't want to go in that final cabinet with what is almost a fait accompli, without many options. But it is a fact that sort of, remember back to last Christmas, where the week before we were still trying to balance a programme of savings to take forward out for consultation. So there aren't many options that were discarded. It's about a process continually trying to close a funding gap. The other things that was covered in this report I didn't talk about this afternoon was about quality impact assessments. And I think one of the improvements certainly I want to see is that when we do go out to consultation, that we do it more meaningfully. So yes, we at the time of publication that we have the overarching quality impact assessment of the budget, but what we're striving to do is have that at a savings line level as well, so that we're really clear about what those savings proposals, both the reshaping and the more traditional savings, what the impact those are likely to have on the delivery of council services, and what impact they're likely to have on the local residents.
Yeah, just to say, I totally understand that, and I understand why that really wasn't possible over the last 2 years. But with the recent settlement and the situation becoming less catastrophic, there is an opportunity for us to put things more where we would want them to be, rather than the necessity of desperately trying to close that gap. And at the end of the day, I think we, as our role here as elected members, you're the experts. We're here to say, okay, rejecting all of your assumptions, what is the baseline thought process behind a decision, and does it make logical sense? As easy it is for you to get grossed down in the detail. What is the base assumption behind that? And we need to be allowed to do that to some extent, rather than saying this is literally the only option available to us. Even though that was the case in the past 2 years, there's an opportunity here for things to be different.
Yeah, just picking up on Councillor Goodjohn's point and just expanding it a little bit. We've spoken before at this meeting for a couple of years now about an option of zero-based budgeting techniques to get down to the nitty-gritty of our budgets. And Matt and you and others have often come back with the answer that it's too expensive to do it and the resources to do that. Given that we've got a longer term settlements coming ahead, is this something that we really should be needing to consider? Because it addresses some of the points that Councillor Goodjohn's brought up, and it allows us to think of things over a longer term. Because I feel very much like, it's a difficult job to keep squeezing that same orange the same time and expecting more to come out of it. And there's going to come a point where it's just not going to work that way. And we're seeing that with some of the savings not being achieved in the way that they are. So at what point do we take that opportunity and not just do it in a piecemeal fashion, but do this as this is a change programme for the council. This is the way we operate, and really get to those things. Because I don't know whether it'll release the savings that I expect it to, but unless you get in there and understand things from the starting point and from the Ewan used the term base, where's the basis for these things? That would be the starting point. Thanks, Matt.
Certainly that's there's a couple of questions in there. The key one for me is around us getting on the front foot with our medium-term financial planning and reshaping programmes, because each autumn, well, we start almost the moment we've agreed the budget in March, don't we? But we get really into the savings in the summer and autumn and early winter, and it's almost sometimes that you feel like you're doing that almost from a standing start. And what we need is that programme, and that's where we're moving to with the reshaping programme, and actually making sure that the balance of our savings aren't those tactical service reduction type savings, but they are reshaping, looking at doing things differently. So that's the trajectory we're very much on, and that's where our ambition is. And on zero-based reviews, it might have sounded like it, but I've not dismissed them out of hand. And certainly within our own directorate, with the new head of ICT, or digital rather, in earlier in the year, that's what she's effectively done with some of her budgeting this time round. And as a director, we've been talking about how we would have such an approach within corporate resources, for example. And you're right, as we move into a more of a rolling medium-term financial plan, then we do have the opportunity perhaps to do that on a rolling basis across all services. But it is incredibly resource heavy. It's not something you do all in one big go.
So the first part of the question, there were a number of questions, but you've said it's expensive. I'd be interested in, so you just referenced it again, this is extremely resource heavy. That's not very, I can't deal with, how do I deal with it's just resource heavy? What are the cost implications? Is it something that is, do you have an idea of what the cost implications if we did it on a cross-council basis? Is this something that is even possible within a council? And if it is, and if the costs are 20 million, whatever it might be, I don't know. I have no idea what resource heavy is. All I've got is that it's expensive and difficult to do. I think it'd be interesting to have something a bit more narrow.
Yeah, I think in general, I'm saying this, it's not something we could undertake from existing resources. We haven't actually worked through and cost out what a zero-based review would entail, and how much it would cost in full. But I know just the size of our accountancy team, doing the regular monitoring, working on the budget, pulling the statutory accounts together, that's broadly the extent of the capacity within the team.
Okay. Are there any other comments? I'll just make a few. Obviously, it's if any council's got the golden bullet to resolve this issue, then I think we ought to go and have a chat with them, and they make a big amount of money. And again, it's very difficult for the council. It's got so many things to do. It sets its corporate plan, and therefore there's got to be a budget to set for the priorities within the corporate plan. And if there's no money in that, then why is it a priority in the corporate plan? And then you've got every other service area that you've got to service in any event with what you've got remaining. I think it's very prudent, Matt, where you say you don't know what you don't know, because you don't. And there's a few key things I think you raised. The year-on-year budget doesn't assist. And I understand Welsh Government's looking at a 2-year, but that's still not really good in some respects. And neither is the electoral cycle either, because no sooner as you're in, by the time you get to year 4, you're making different decisions. So that doesn't assist the process in any event. One of the key things I think a council has to deal with are the additional requirements imposed on by Welsh Government. So they bring out lots of legislation with no additional funding and say, over to you, local government, you've got to deliver this, but you've got to deliver it out of your existing funds. And I think that hits local authorities from the sideline. And again, if you've got no surplus, then you've got to cut someone to make those determinations. Coupled with that, you've got your in-house issues, and then you've also in-house issues and demands, and you've also got your unforeseen costs. So, if something goes very badly wrong and you're having to pick it up either, from your existing budget or from general reserves, you've got major issues. And the final one I just want to mention is grants. Local authorities are given lots of grants which are hypothecated. They do superb jobs using that money. Then all of a sudden Welsh Government withdraws it. So either the council baselines it as part of its budget or it cuts it. So what happens is you raise the expectation of the public out there, you cut the service, and then all of a sudden it goes pear-shaped. And I think, a lot of these issues, need to be approached. And the officer's got to pick those up. And unfortunately, the consequences are taken by the council at some stage because that's what raised. So I think, all in all, if you can solve this issue, and I hear what's being said, again, discussion, dialogue, etc. I think on occasion, bold decisions need to be made. I think the council delivers so many services. On occasion, it needs to say, no, we're not going to provide services anymore in this area collectively and take the consequences rather than spread the jam-so thing that you actually provide very poor services. So I think, it's a maturity exercise. I take on board what Councillor Goodjohn says, there needs to be open discussion and dialogue, whether that's cross-party or whatever, to ensure that you get the very best for the citizens of the Vale Glamorgan. Unfortunately, the officer's got to pick it up and make the best of this. So all in all, I think the plan which you set is which you submitted, the management plan is fair and reasonable and needs to be accepted. Clearly, you're currently working on the budget for this financial year. It's had a reasonable settlement. Who knows what's going to happen next year? But this year you can only work on year by year at the moment. I don't know whether there's any indication being given for next year's settlement. But you can only do what you can do with what you know. And I think there needs to be understanding, which clearly there may be from Wales Audit and Welsh Government, that it is difficult. It's not easy out there. And, councils do the very best. They can tweak things, but clearly they do the very best with what they can. If there are no other comments, if we go to the recommendations, I think the recommendation is that we endorse the proposed council's actions contained in Appendix B to the report to address the recommendations, and we pick up some of the comments made by Councillor Goodjohn and Councillor Hoop in regards to, how future budgets are dealt with, the openness, the transparency, the involvement of elected members. So I'm prepared to move, please. Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Secondly, Councillor Goodjohn. Anyone against? Nope. Thank you very much. Next item on the report is the annual whistleblowing report.
Thank you,
Vicky?
Chair. Thank you, Chair. Members of this committee will recall that the current policy, which is in place, was that was revised and approved by this the then audit committee in February 2020. The committee will no doubt recall the considerable work which was undertaken between the launch of the Speak Out Hub and a comprehensive promotional campaign which was undertaken during October 2023. It's noted within the report that there has been an increase in reported whistleblowing incidents, which demonstrates, I'd suggest, the effectiveness of the communications and promotional efforts in raising awareness of the policy, and in particular the legal protections afforded to whistleblowers. And the result that we see is that there's been an increase in number, which shows an encouraging pattern of staff being willing to report these issues. There is no discernible pattern, but recent trends indicate an increase in staff behaviours, which involve bullying, victimisation and discriminatory actions. And notably, some of these patterns stem from multiple repeated reports concerning same individuals. What I would like to say at this stage is, and I've reflected upon this as I was preparing this report to present to Governance and Audit Committee, is that whilst we continue to learn and adapt, I think we've reached a point where we consider that we have now need to report further information on the whistleblowing cases that come before this committee, without, of course, compromising employees' personal information and confidentiality. And I'm happy to pick up later on in this discussion any points that members of this committee and Chair you wish to make in relation to that. What I should say is we don't have a significant amount of data. But in discussions with the operational manager, customer relations, and the head of human resources, I think we should be looking to categorise outcomes, look at the wider reporting and the recommendations which are then taken back to directors within the whistleblowing policy, the complaints, those that are referred to under the unacceptable actions by citizens, health and safety staff, and the linkage between those policies. And I think that would provide for a broader reporting process as to how the Council is operating and reporting within this space. Looking at the records that we've held now since 2015-2016, all directorates show an upward trend in reporting allegations, although overall numbers remain low. In summary, the increase in trend in reporting since 22-23 shows an average number of whistleblowing reports increasing month on month since 21-22 to 1.6 reports each month, compared to 0.1 reports in 21-22. During 24-25 financial year to the end of October 2024, which this report covers, the average stood at 0.9 reports per month, with 41 reports received since the launch of the policy due to the awareness raising through promotional campaign and it becoming easier to report, we'd suggest, via the Speak Out Hub. Of the 64 reports received since reporting started to be recorded in 2015-2016, 9 were received since April 2024, and 20% as of October 2024, remained under investigation, with 3 having concluded since the data was sourced for this report, which will be reported through to the mid-year update to the Governance and Audit Committee. 12% of the reports received considered fall outside of the policy and were considered, therefore, under HR policies, grievance and disciplinary policies and the like. Of the 49 investigations concluded, 74% were not upheld, 7% fully upheld and 19% partially upheld for 24-25 to October 2024. None have been upheld, with 1 partially upheld. So looking at the key issues for the committee's consideration, referencing again the trends in reporting, an upward trend, as I've indicated, in the whistleblowing allegations across all directorates, although it's notable that overall numbers remain low. Recent increases show a greater promotion of the whistleblowing policy, easier reporting mechanisms and simplified language via the Speak Out on StaffNet and the telephone line, and access to it. 41 reports have been received in total since the policy's relaunch in 2022. The data as referenced is set out for members in the report and demonstrates, I'd suggest, the monthly reporting analysis and 23-24 trends, with average monthly reporting, which you can see set out at paragraphs 2.5 to 2.7, and financial year comparisons of whistleblowing reports increasing as mentioned. So during 24-25 financial year, the reports and investigations are set out there from 2.9 onwards to the 31st of October 2024, with 11 whistleblowing reports received in total. Of the 19 reports received in 23-24, a total number of 4 incidents related to illegal practices, including fraud or misuse of council assets and equipment, 8 related to failure to meet legal obligations, which included mishandling of funds and employment disputes. There were no incidents reported relating to health and safety, damage to the environment, or miscarriage of justice. And those categories that I'm referring to are obviously those that are defined defined within the relevant legislation. So the council, as I've indicated, recognises, I would say, the need, and officers in particular recognise the need to be able to learn from the whistleblowing investigations. And I think it's right to say that this should be the case to improve the specific situation and, where applicable, to apply the learning more widely to reduce the risk of similar incidents arising in the future. Obviously, the things that we would want to look at in reviewing the data and making the data more meaningful in reporting it to committee would be to look at strengthening processes and procedures, communication with staff training, and instigation of disciplinary procedures, which has occurred, I can say, in relation to one instance in particular. The need to promote wider awareness of the policy emerged previously as indicated as a key theme from the most recent survey results. But I think that we have travelled the journey now in relation to awareness raising. And whilst that will continue at a certain pace, I think the next task in hand really is to review the data and provide a more meaningful update to the Governance and Audit Committee, which with the next report coming in mid-term. I would also like to reference the Council's recognition of the vital role that trade unions play in supporting their members who report whistleblowing concerns anonymously. There have been cases where trade unions have acted as intermediaries, and that's allowed us to communicate with whistleblowers whilst maintaining their anonymity. It's very difficult to progress a whistleblowing concern through an investigation where they are reported anonymously. And early in the new year, what we intend to do as a group of officers is to engage in discussions as part of a brief review of the forms and processes which are used to underpin this policy. And what we'll be looking to achieve is a review to explore enhancements to the online form, including any addition to the ability of freely writing certain information which exists currently, which can contain, we would suggest, prompts to include certain information, for example, the dates of behaviours which have occurred and whether it's continuing, which can, we hope, aid those investigations. So the key themes emerging from the review of the whistleblowing policy will be addressed during the next promotional campaign and tracked through to annual staff survey. So we're not going to launch an individual bespoke survey. What we intend to do is proceed with the next review as part of the annual staff survey. And I'll come back to the committee mid-year with a further review, and when I hope we will have a greater detail in relation to the data that we're seeing coming through. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Victoria. Are there any questions? Councillor Norman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kirsty. I wonder, would it be possible to have a breakdown of the departments that are affected by these complaints, whether they're more prevalent in one area of the council or others? It'd be interesting to see, the outcome of this, to see where we need to focus our attention more.
So I can deal with that, Councillor Norman. If you look at the report, it's detailed within the body of the report, but what I can confirm is of the 11 whistleblowing reports which were received during 24-25 financial year to date, 3 related to environment and housing, 2 to learning and skills, 1 to corporate resources and 4 to social services and 1 to the Police Directorate. They're set out in the report. I haven't got any more detail in relation to those at this moment. I know that Tony Curlis, the Operational Manager Customer Relations, is on the call to deal with another item, and I'm not certain that Tony could provide any more information, but if he does, I'm sure he'd be happy to come in and provide that detail.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's obvious you can't give us specific details of every case. We just wonder if there was a general trend amongst these that we could recognise or not, or they were just individual grievances.
I think what I would say to that, Councillor Norman, is that what we're seeing in the data and on reviewing the policy during the last few months is there's a general increasing trend in numbers of whistleblowing reports under the policy. I think it's right to say that many of those are then referred on to be dealt with not under this policy but under HR policies. We're seeing also information that suggests that the concerns that are being raised within the policy relate to bullying, harassment and victimisation. We have had a trend where we've had several whistleblowing concerns reported in relation to same individuals. So those are the trends that we're seeing. But I suspect that some of the questions, certainly your question, Councillor Norman, can be better addressed in future reports that come before this committee. And I've referenced the mid-term review that will be brought here to provide a little bit more detail around, or analysis rather, around that data, which, as I've indicated, we don't fully hold at this stage. And it's a discussion I've had with Tony Curlis, because obviously he is responsible for collating that data within the Granicus system. But we are looking at that and looking at ways that we can make that more significant, really, for the committee to consider.
Thank you, Victoria.
Tony, did you want to come in? You haven't got your microphone down?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Excuse my error. I'm not used to hybrid meetings. So I can tell you that since we started to keep records, Environment and Housing had 25 allegations, and Social Services 20 allegations. That's out of this 63 in total, I think, since that we've had since we started to keep records. So about a third for each of those directorates. We do have information, or we capture information on Granicus with regards to which specific services those allegations relate to within those directorates. So as Vicky mentioned in her report, we are looking at providing more detailed information to provide a bit more context to committee in the future, and that's certainly something we can take a look at and include going forward.
Thank you, Tony. Nigel?
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on some similar points, really, and similar to Councillor Norman, and thank you, Victoria, for that, and reference to more outcome-focused information being provided in future. That is definitely lacking in this report. 2.1.3 talks about incident outcomes, but then goes on to talk purely in outputs, the numbers. And I'm really interested in what has changed as a result of these whistleblowing, especially when you're talking about things like harassment and bullying and those sorts of words. We would be really interesting to know what's changed as a result of those whistleblowing, and also thinking about who's making the whistleblowing allegations and what's happened to them, if we know who they are. Obviously, if they're anonymous, we don't know, but just having that sort of information in future reports would be really useful, please. I know you've referred to that a number of times, but there's a couple of points there. One final one as well is, would it be possible to have this sort of reporting in something like a table or a graph form rather than just lots of narrative? Because it's really hard to pull out the various years and comparisons when it's all in narrative form. So just a few points to consider there, please.
Thank you, Nigel. Yeah, that's absolutely no problem at all. I've touched on many of the points that you've raised already in presenting the report, and in terms of the graph, yeah, absolutely, we can work on that. Some of the information that Tony provides from within the Granicus system is in that format, and yeah, absolutely, that's no issue at all.
Thanks, Victoria. Councillor Hooper?
Thanks for this report, Vicky, and I think it seems like we've got an improvement from last year, and particularly with the awareness raising. But I've just got a couple of points, and the first one is on awareness raising, and I'm a little bit concerned that we maybe resting on laurels a little bit by saying we're going to move back from that. I think that this is such an important area, and colleagues need to feel confident that they can make their concerns raised in a safe environment. And I think this is one of the things that I would push for us to make sure that we keep this top of the agenda, because people will forget. we'll have new colleagues joining, other ones leaving, and I think this is really important. A couple of other questions. I'm interested, I noticed the point about the union members being supported on anonymous issues. I wonder what happens to non-union members. I can't at the moment think what our penetration of union membership in the council is, but it's quite low if memory serves. So that's only a few people. And I just wonder whether the union reps would be prepared to help out. And I appreciate this is probably a question for them, not for you, but whether they'd be able to help colleagues out with anonymising those concerns. And the final point, and I think this is, it is really good news to have very few concerns being raised through whistleblowing, but it also could hide something where people still don't feel confident. So this is one of those weird things that we want it to be low, but we want to make sure that everyone who has got a concern has raised it. I'm just wondering how this council compares with other councils, perhaps in Wales. Do we have any views on that you can? I know it's tricky. We've got different numbers working. We run our services in different ways. But is there some comparison that can say that we're about normal when it comes to it? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. So if I can deal with those 3 points in reverse. In relation to your last point, one of the things that I want to do, and I haven't yet had the opportunity to do, is to benchmark the data that we're seeing in terms of the numbers of people reporting via the whistleblowing policy. There are reports in the public domain, and I'm in discussions with my colleagues on my network, and I think it's right to say that other councils do report that benchmarking data. I think it would be prudent for us to be comparing ourselves with our near neighbours of similar size. But yeah, that's certainly something that I'm intending to do. And when I come back here mid-term to report in relation to the use of the whistleblower policy at that point, I'm hoping that that information will form part of that update. I think in relation to the point about the need to make sure that we keep on top of this, I'm not suggesting, and I apologise if it sort of was interpreted the wrong way, but I'm not suggesting that we should ease up on promotional campaigns. The campaign that my predecessor undertook previously was quite a considerable, extensive campaign. At this point, the intention is to run the next campaign awareness raising. I shouldn't use the word campaign, but the awareness raising through the annual staff survey. But what I've already decided, and in discussion with other colleagues, is that if that doesn't proceed as I feel that satisfies me in relation to managing this policy and reporting on this policy, is that we will come back mid-year and listen to the members of this Governance and Audit Committee's views on that, because I don't think it's something that we should, as you say, rest on our laurels over, because it's very important for the Council to ensure that this policy is maintained and that it's open to all members of staff to use. So I think that's what I would say about that one. In relation to the trade union representatives, from the information that's been provided to me and in discussions with colleagues, head of human resources, and to a lesser extent, the operational manager, customer relations and audit internal audit colleagues, is that in those instances where we've received anonymous complaints, and they have tended to be more recent than in previous years, and I don't know why that is, but they have come in the last few months. We have fortunately been in a situation where those individuals have had trade union representation, but I think you're quite right to raise that point, Councillor Hooper, because that was the same thing occurred to me, is what about people who aren't represented by trade union representatives? And I think that's what's led us on as a group of officers to consider other ways of supporting, for want of a better word, anonymous complainants who use this policy when actually we've got no effective means of communicating with them. And one of the things that we're going to be doing, and I reference it in the report, early in the new year, is to hold a workshop between us just to look at how we can look at the procedures and processes that we have in place to address that point. I don't know if that deals with all of your points, but I'll come back if it, yeah.
Any other questions? No, any comments, anyone? I've just got a couple of comments. They weren't questions, Vicky. I'm just wondering, picking up from what Nigel says, is the structure of the report itself, whether it can be addressed, because there's lots of information in here, paragraphs, paragraph 2.4 to 2.7. So what, average of 0.1 reports per month or whatever, that adds no value in reality, in my opinion, no value whatsoever. And I think the other issue I've got is obviously we in the report back to 2015-16, and I know we may want to look at the trend data, but is 10 years too far back? And again, it gets very confusing. You look at some of the paragraphs, we're talking about 64 incidents report 2015, then we go into 42 investigations concluded up to 31st October, then we got 23, 11 reports. So we're jumping from year to year to year. So, and again, if any of these have been outstanding for over 12 months, then I would be extremely concerned, because I would have thought within the policy they should be dealt with, timely, and within a reasonable amount of time. So I'm just wondering whether whether you can look at Tony, the structure of the report in regards to the annual amount going through. Again, you've picked up what was learned from those investigations where they were either upheld or partially upheld, which I think you've acknowledged there. And again, the directorates, again, it's important because, hopefully there's not a trend in some of the directorates in regards to what's being picked up by members of staff. The issue for me, again, is obviously there's statutory protection for these individuals who raise whistleblowing issues. But I know that last year, when we considered this report, there was a recommendation, I think, coming out of the committee in regards to how many members of staff are still in post, having made a whistleblowing referral, because I think there was some concern by members about, the impact on that individual, and are they still employed by the council, and whether we can get that information is another issue. But it then goes to the statutory protection. And I just endorse what was said, and I thank you for the clarification. Resting on the laurels of a 92% return in 2023, in some respects, is really good, but actually you'll have the turnover of staff. You've got people retired, you've got new members of staff coming in, and it will be interesting to see on the staff awareness survey what your response is in regards to that as well. And I think that is really important moving forward, that it's not lost, and you've not lost it, and it's going to be embraced going forward. So those are my only comments. I don't know whether anyone else has got any. Councillor Hooper?
Can I just pick up on that point you were just making there, Chair, about timeliness? And I just wonder, is there a process that if a colleague raises so this is a question, sorry, rather than a comment, I hope you'll allow me. Is there a point where a colleague raises a concern via the whistleblowing technique, and if it doesn't get resolved in the time, do they have recourse then through the grievance process and say that this hasn't been dealt with in a timeline that I would have expected it to, and therefore could lead them through to potential constructive dismissal or some other endpoints? And I'm just wondering, do we have a target? Do we give people some expectation management at the start so they know? Because it must feel really, if you put a whistleblowing complaint in and it takes a long time, that's almost as bad as it being found against you or not being done. It's the feeling of not being heard.
And as it's been mentioned, these are anonymous. There are protections afforded to the whistleblowers. But in relation to the point that you've just made, Councillor Hooper, I'm not personally aware of any cases where that has occurred, where there has been a whistleblowing concern raised, which has then led to the individual becoming disgruntled about the time it's taken. Some of the whistleblowing reports that we have received have taken a time, and that is something that isn't acceptable in my opinion. It's very, very difficult to identify an investigator. We don't have the expertise in-house to appoint internal investigators to deal with some of these issues. We do have to rely on external investigators. Certainly for me, the timelines for some of these investigations has to come down, and it's something that's in the forefront of my mind. When we receive the complaints or the concerns raised under the policy, obviously, if there is going to be an investigation under the policy, that's generally led by the head of human resources. But in fairness, we as a group of officers take responsibility as a whole for how that investigation progresses. We have regular, I think, monthly meetings with the head of internal audits and the principal officer, Joan, and the operational manager, customer relations, and the fraud officer. Internal fraud officer, to discuss and ensure that we're keeping up to date with the statistics. But certainly it's certainly a work in progress as far as I'm concerned, and it's certainly something that, picking up on all the points that have been made here today, that I'll be taking back, and we'll be mindful of those points in coming back before you mid-term with a further review. I think they're all very valid points.
Yeah, the only other thing, it may be worth having another graph of sometimes saying the length of time it's taken from start to finish of the whistleblowing referrals, because you could have 3 columns, can you? 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and too long or whatever. The other thing I didn't realise is this is my own fault now, I've not looked at the whistleblowing policy because obviously it was adopted in 2020, long before the vast majority members of this committee were appointed, and it's not listed as a background paper either. So it may be worthwhile just at some stage circulating a copy. I don't know whether it needs a copy of the review, because again, picking up the points we've raised, it will say the timeline in that, wouldn't it? It'll say, similar to an employment issue, it must be dealt with in, as quickly as possible, or as reasonable as possible. But again, I think you appreciate it, and every other member in this chamber appreciates it. To have a whistleblowing matter where you've raised it really does go on your mind, because it needs to be resolved fairly quickly, and I think you're acknowledging that, and anything that can be made to ease the process a lot easier would be greatly appreciated, I'm sure.
And I think it's also right to say that when a matter is ongoing for some time, that there's also the risk that the person complained about becomes aware of it, because obviously some of these concerns and complaints that are raised under the policy then will sit alongside at some point other employee relations matters. So I think that's an important point to make. I think Tony would shoot me if I didn't say that at the moment we don't hold the data in the way that we'd like to present the updates. So that is something, as I say, we are going to be working on. And it did occur to me as I was listening to some of the comments that my predecessor did undertake some benchmarking, and we had some data back, I think, for the February 2024 report that Debbie presented to the committee, whereby some councils were getting zero reports on their whistleblowing. But it's from recollection, I don't think she had a huge response from a monitoring officer group, which is where she looked for the benchmarking data. But it's certainly something we can put into the statistics when they're reported.
Okay, if there are no other comments, can I just say thank you for taking on board all the comments which have been made. I'm sure that you and Tony can go away and consider the matters as we move forward. But again, the aim of the game is to only improve the process, not to, to put any sort of anything in the way that doesn't assist you. So if we can assist in any way further, then you only need to ask. Okay, the recommendations are that we note the contents of the report, which obviously we do, and that we continue to receive a mid-year review in relation to the policy implementation and incidents. And obviously, I think the third one is that you take on board the comments made in regards to any future report coming before this committee. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Seconded, Councillor Hooper. Anyone against? No, thank you. Thank you, Victoria. The next one is the Corporate Complaints Annual Report. Tony?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. So this report covers two associated items, our 10th Annual Complaints and Compliments Report and the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales Annual Letter for 23-24. The Local Government and Elections Wales Act 21 requires Governance and Audit Committee to review and assess the authority's ability to handle complaints effectively and to make recommendations in relation to this. And so our annual complaints and compliments reports presented to Assist Committee in doing that and captures a number of corporate complaints received, outcomes, how the council has improved its services, and the outcome of some user research undertaken to assess the residents' experience of making a complaint to the council. Social services complaints are managed under a separate regulation, but some information is provided in the annual report for context, as is some information around ombudsman complaints. The key trends are set out in the covering report and in the executive summary, which starts on page 3 of the annual report, and in more detail in the performance summary section, and statistical data is set out in Appendix C. But there are some things that I'd like to draw the committee's attention to. The overall narrative is one of an increasing number of complaints as a result of services not meeting service standards. There's an increasing number of valid complaints, so more complaints are being upheld, or a greater proportion are being upheld. And there is a beginnings of some improvement in responsiveness. So you will know in previous reports, we've highlighted the fact that there's been a declining trend in how quickly we respond to complaints. That seems to be showing at least some early signs of improvement. And also there is a very clear need to improve how we communicate better with complainants and actually in delivering services more generally. Page 4 in the report is the performance summary, and we can see that during 23-24 we received the highest number of annual complaints, highest number recorded since centralised records have been kept. 881 complaints were received, and that's a 78% increase on the previous year, and significantly higher than our 10-year annual average of 439 per annum. Environment and Housing Directorate continues to receive the highest number of complaints at 679, which is almost double the number received in 2023, albeit that service, or that directorate rather, provides the greater number of kind of customer-facing services and interactions with the public. Waste Management made some significant changes to services during 23-24, including the introduction of garden waste subscriptions and some changes to our commercial waste recycling. And the service received 357 complaints during the year. That's an increase of 178% on the previous year. Together with an increasing trend in numbers of reported complaints, we've also seen an increase in the number of complaints which have been upheld either in full or in part, rising to 63% from the previous year's figure of 46%. And this actually bucks the recent trend where we were seeing a declining number of complaints being upheld or partly upheld. 23-24 also saw an increase in complaints escalated to stage 2 of the process, rising from 5.5 to 7.6%. However, with 93% or 92.4% of complaints resolved at stage 1, this still suggests that the majority of complaints are being investigated well at stage 1. As I mentioned, the complaints investigators recorded that failing to meet service standards resulted in 61% of complaints received during the year, and with policy and processes not followed, accounting for 16.8%. So by far, the greater proportion of complaints falls within those two categories. I mentioned that responsiveness was a particular concern over recent years, as there was seen to be a decline in responsiveness. During 23-24, 59% of stage 1 complaints were resolved within target, so that's a 10-day target. And while that doesn't represent an improvement in performance, the last 3 years seems to show that the decline in performance at least has been arrested. So we had 61% of complaints within target in 21-22 and 59% in 22-23. So that performance is starting to level out. We've worked really hard with services to improve the software functionality and the visibility of complaints, and that includes the fact that we're now reporting quarterly to SLT. Those actions are summarised in page 3 of the report, and we're really trying hard to assist complaint investigators to resolve complaints in a timely manner. And obviously, that's an area of work that we're going to take forward into the future. On page 7 of the report, we summarised complaints made to statutory authorities. We had a total of 5 complaints about Welsh language, 3 of which were from the Welsh Language Commissioner and 2 directly from members of the public. 2 complaints related to Welsh language on the Legacy Leisure website, 1 related to signage, 1 to officer behaviour towards Welsh language, and 1 to a lack of reference to Welsh language in the budget consultation. In 22-23, we sought to attain a better understanding of complainants' experience of making a complaint, and we undertook some direct interviews with complainants and that provided some really good insight. However, as committee pointed out last year, with only 3 interviews undertaken, the range of views obtained was fairly limited and the value was fairly restricted. So for 23-24, we changed our approach to try and gain a wider range of views, and we sent out 257 surveys which were distributed by email, and we received 67 responses. The research report is included in Appendix A and summarised in the customer research section on page 10 of the annual report. However, some of the key findings include that 69% of respondents said that they made a complaint online. Communication, again, was highlighted as a key area for improvement, with 60% of respondents stating that they weren't aware of how quickly they should expect a response, and 65% telling us that the response took too long in any case. And this chimes with the fact that only 59% of our stage 1 complaints were resolved within the 10 working day timescale. Only 27% of respondents felt that the council provided adequate updates on progress of their complaint, and 64% said that they needed to contact the council again to find out what was happening. So we weren't keeping complainants informed. They had to contact us to find out how their complaint was progressing. So communication is a key area for improvement going forward, and we're reviewing how we can improve in this area. But one way to improve that would be to resolve more complaints within the target timescales. Learning from complaints is a really important area, and the main cause of complaints, as I mentioned, was the fact that service standards weren't met. In 22-23, we started to collect examples from services of how we are improving processes and services as a result of learning from complaints. And over the 2-year period, we've collected 22 examples. 7 of those examples were for the current reporting period, and they're summarised in the report starting on page 11. And all examples are summarised in Appendix B. In order to collect more examples and to raise a profile of this work, we're going to start collecting these examples on a quarterly basis rather than on an annual basis, so that we can get more examples and better quality examples and more detail, which we will include in future reports. Of course, we do get compliments as well. We received 278 compliments during 23-24 about council services, and 163 of these related to social services. Waste management also recorded a significant number of compliments at 55. So many of these issues could be considered onto the Brilliant Basics workstream of the Council's reshaping programme. Doing the simple things well can make a really big difference to our resident experience of the complaints process, but also accessing services in general, and to improve our overall operational efficiency. So going forward, our focus will be on improving the number of complaints that are investigated within target, and that includes the development of real-time reporting for SLT and service managers. Improving how we collect and publicise examples of how learning from complaints has been used to improve services, developing a robust mechanism for insightful user research, and deliver the recommendations in the 23-24 complaint survey. So that concludes the kind of summary of the annual complaints report. And of course, when a complainant is not satisfied with how the council has investigated their complaint, they have the right to escalate to the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales, who will consider whether the council obviously has investigated appropriately and reached appropriate conclusions. The Ombudsman produces an annual letter which summarises the work they have undertaken across Wales and in relation to specific organisations, which of course includes Villa Glamorgan Council. And the Ombudsman requires the Council to present the annual letter to Cabinet and Governance and Audit Committee, consider the data in the letter to understand more about our performance and complaints, and to inform the Ombudsman of the outcome of the Council's considerations and proposed actions. And in the 23-24 letter, many of the trends that we've identified in our annual report are also picked up there. The number of complaints made to the Ombudsman from Villa Glamorgan residents increased by 57%, from 49 to 77. However, I think it should be noted that of that 28 case increase, 8 complaints fell outside of the Ombudsman's jurisdiction, 12 were premature, and 2 were closed after initial consideration, leaving 8 additional valid complaints, which is still an increase, of course. Poor communications were a significant feature of the Ombudsman complaints, with common themes including failure to respond to communications, not keeping residents updated, and delays in completing complaints. As with previous years, however, no complaints were taken into consideration, and of the 71 complaints that were resolved during the year, 15 were resolved through the early resolution process, and that's the same number as last year. The process requires the Council to agree to recommendations made by the Ombudsman to resolve issues presented by the complainant. During 23-24, this included making some time and trouble payments to residents totalling £450, and also included requirements for the Council to make apologies and to deliver commitments made to residents. And of those 50 recommendations, 92 were delivered within the target timescales set out by the Ombudsman, and the 4 that missed the deadlines were where we had already asked for an extension, but because we didn't deliver within the original deadline, the Ombudsman records that as a missed deadline. So that concludes my summary of both reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, for that comprehensive run through the report. Questions? Councillor Goodjohn?
Yeah, I have a few questions, if I may, Tony. I'll take them one by one for your ease. So first off, I'm quite interested by who is drafting and sending the responses to our residents. I think I particularly want to know how far or down the command chain are they? Are we talking operational managers, middle manager? What do you have any kind of data as to the average status within the organisation that the responses are coming from?
Yes, so stage 1 complaints tend to be completed by team managers and operational managers, and stage 2 complaints tend to be operational managers and heads of service. Obviously, if an operational manager does a stage 1 the stage 2 report tends to be to a head of service, sometimes a director, and mostly those are within the same directorate as the person who investigated the stage 1 complaint, but depending on the circumstances, that can also be to an officer from a different directorate as well.
That's very interesting, Tony. I'll get back to that in comments then. You've mentioned brilliant basics, and since you use that term, I'll ask you if you have any more information as to the kind of training that's being provided, either to your team or to some of the people that are making those responses, as to the way that we can satisfy our residents with simple and easy, very basic responses that get to the heart of the issue quickly, rather than civil servant speak, basically.
Yeah, in relation to managing complaints, officers who undertake complaints have had training from the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales team in terms of identifying what is and what isn't a complaint, what good practice looks like in terms of response, and that includes timeliness. It also includes use of language or tone of voice, and avoiding use of jargon, that type of thing. And also in autumn of last year, we also ran some workshops with colleagues who undertake complaint investigations to look at some of the data in terms of responsiveness and some of the feedback that we've had from some of the user research that we've done as a way of informing colleagues about what's important to our residents. But there's a lot more we could do there, and certainly we can improve in things going forward. But I think corporately there's some work being undertaken that's looking at tone of voice for communications in general, and obviously that will inform how we respond to complaints.
Okay, you've answered my other question then, so thank you. That's all from me for questions.
Councillor Hooper?
Thanks, Tony, for going through these reports. A couple of things. One, I'm just trying to link a report we took earlier on the council's the concerns from Audit Wales about the financial planning, and it strikes me that customer service are it's a key opportunity to get them involved in, especially when you're reshaping services, because it looks as though as services have been limited to residents, they complain more, and that shouldn't surprise anyone, but it should be something that fits into our thinking. So I'm just wondering how involved your teams are in supporting managers in working up reshaping services. So there's that question. I'll run through them all if you don't mind. The second one, and this is a niche issue coming up. At full council a couple of months ago, I asked a question about whether or not the council would would make an active encouragement to people who drive council vans and things that they adhere to the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. And I'd be really interested as to whether or not any complaints from residents relate to 20 miles an hour excesses by council-driven vehicles. So there's that one. And the last point in relation to the timeliness of complaints, and I'd be interested in your view, Tony, as to what the problem with that is. So is it about them being the process when it hits operational managers, do things get stuck there? And what's the mechanism for resolving any of those blockages? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. In terms of reshaping services, broadly, the customer relations team is heavily involved in work to improve services in general. So a good example of that would be we've got a top 20 processes project going on just now, which is looking at the top 20 services that are accessed by our residents. And we work with the digital team, customer service team, and the service owners to look at how we can improve those services, starting off from the perspective of the resident. So trying to understand, first of all, what our residents' perspective on the service is, what they need from the service, and really focusing in on delivering that and taking out any kind of waste, if you like, from the process. And that's looking at across all channels. So, of course, online, but also telephone, face-to-face. So, because we need to make sure that our services are delivered well across all of those services. As part of that work, we collate a lot of data, looking at the number of times those services are accessed, but we also look at the complaint data as part of that as well. So broadly speaking, we are involved in that work. In terms of your second question, I'm not aware of any stage 1 complaints which relate to non-adherence to 20 miles an hour. I know that we have had complaints in the past with regards to how council vans have been driven and operated. But that's not to say that there aren't any complaints that relate to that 20 miles an hour limit. That's something I can look into and come back to you on if that's okay. And in terms of the timeliness of reports, I think we've worked really hard with our colleagues to try and improve that. I think there was an issue with the software or the system that we're using to record complaints, where the process meant that because when it was recorded, there were issues around the number of people who were notified that complaint existed, and then an issue with somebody taking ownership of that complaint. However, we did some work last March with colleagues who manage complaints within services, and we made some improvements in that software so that there is that those notifications go to a limited number of people, and there's more encouragement for someone to take ownership of that. The system will automatically then send email notifications to colleagues who are identified to investigate those complaints, to let them know that they should investigate, but also it'll let them know whenever the 10-day target is coming up. So I think it sends an automatic reminder 2 days before the target, and then on the day of the target, and then there are reminders kind of after that as well. There was also an issue where complaints were being allocated, small number of complaints were being allocated to incorrect teams, and there wasn't an easy mechanism within the software to get that complaint to the team that should be responsible for investigating it. We have changed some of the functionality within the software to allow that to happen really quickly, and we're really hopeful that will help. All of those measures will help improve how quickly we get back to residents with a response. So I hope that answers.
That's okay. Are there any other questions for Tony? Tony, I've just got a couple, if I may. In regards to stage 1 complaints, as you said, they're dealt with as efficiently and effectively as possible. I'm just wondering whether or not the issue of not mentioning stage 2 of the complaints process is now included in all the letters being sent out by directorates?
Yes, so if directorates are using our template letter responses for stage 1s, they should all mention the stage 2 process and actually the Ombudsman escalation as well.
Yeah, thanks. Do you know if that's actually factually correct, though? has there been any sort of dip survey in regards to some of the letters going out from directorates?
We haven't, but that would be a really good idea, and that's something that we're happy to take forward as a kind of quality assurance exercise in the rest of this year.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I don't want to give you more and more work, but not mentioning stage 2 could actually be the reason why you're not getting many stage 2 referrals, but that's that. In regards to the Ombudsman letter, and I think I'm pleased that you clarified it in the report, page 5 of the Ombudsman letter raises the veil as 77 complaints, and obviously 71% of those were closed down fairly quickly. But when you read the percentage figures, we've got the highest in Wales. And I think, as you quite rightly have done, we just need to set that into context, because it doesn't look good in percentage figures. You know, we're the worst authority in Wales. So I'll just say thank you for that. And I think there does need to be maybe some communication out at some stage to clarify that point. The other issue is page 9 of the Ombudsman's report, and again, you've picked it up. The Ombudsman has made 50 recommendations, and obviously it says within her letter basically to report the investigation and report to drive improvement in the organisation. I'm just a little bit concerned that we don't know what those 50 reports of improvement were as an audit committee. If we were receiving other reports from our internal audit team or wherever, we would normally understand what those recommendations were. But it would also be useful to understand what service improvements were made as a result of those recommendations, because again, it goes back to the whole issue around the council's complaints, which again, you've dealt with adequately in regards to, you know, what are the outcomes of the complaints which are made, how there's been service improvement. So it would be worthwhile, you know, is there any narrative that could be put to those 50 recommendations and what was done about it and what was the outcome? Clearly, 48 were dealt with within the timescale of 23-24. There were only 2 outstanding. And again, I think the Ombudsman makes reference that they were still outstanding as at the 9th of April 2024. Can you just confirm that those have now been dealt with in a timely manner and that they've been addressed, and again, were servicing improvements made there? And as I said, what was learned as a result? What was learned as a result of all those recommendations?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I can confirm that all recommendations have now been, for 23-24, have now been completed. We do keep a record of the recommendations, and in fact, the customer service team is responsible for liaising with the service areas to make sure that those recommendations are accepted and delivered within timescales. So we do have a record, and that's something that certainly we can include in future reports, ensuring that obviously there's a degree of confidentiality in what we deliver, and certainly we can assess. Make an assessment in terms of what, if there have been actual process improvements or service improvements as a result of those. The majority tend to be related to communication and timely delivery of actions that have been promised. But certainly that's something we can include going forward in future reports.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. That would be useful to know, because again, if it was an audit report, we'd be checking up that they'd all been delivered within a specified timetable, and that there was nothing outstanding. And, you know, basically to ensure that your team are sort of not holding the baby as something's not been implemented by the directorate, which again, I think we should know about if there's an issue with a directorate not implementing a recommendation. Okay, thanks for that. Comments? Any comments? Councillor Goodjohn.
Yeah, where to start? First off, thanking Tony and his team, because I would say very little of this is at all their fault, because most of it is the response of us as an organisation corporately. They do a fantastic job at logging all of this, especially with the resources that they have. So first off, thank you so much to Tony and his team. You said it earlier, we are the worst in Wales. I have to say that if you dig deeper down as well, we have one of the highest intervention rates from the Public Service Ombudsman, which is an extremely bad look, considering the number that we're getting. We got more complaints directly to the Public Service Ombudsman than Swansea, which, considering our population sizes, is remarkable. The second most number of complaints directly, when you don't even consider a percentage of the population, only being beaten by Cardiff, which is an achievement in of itself. I really hope that the Brilliant Basics programme can bring some change here, because and I hope there is additional work to be done when it comes to the responses of managers. And I'm not picking out anyone individually or any director individually, but when I'm looking at some of the example responses that are in this document, I think it's quite poor on the whole. And when you look at the response of the Public Service Ombudsman of what they're looking for, what can we do to reconcile for this complaint, a lot of it is, can you give an apology? Fine, but it's about acknowledging and respecting the person's complaint. And it's acknowledging that, yes, they've made the right call in complaining, and it helps, because it should help us as an organisation build and become more resilient and improve the services for members of the public. When we get a complaint, it should be a positive thing that someone's taken time out of their day that they could be doing anything else to say that, look, you need to improve this part of the service. I would love to see a crackdown on this from higher managers to make sure that everything is done as timely as possible. This is something that has gone from, okay, it's an issue and we're aware of it, to being absolutely critical that our reputation is being hurt by this. So I think there's a general organisational culture thing here, and Brilliant Basics needs to part of this strategy, part of this reshaping programme needs to include making sure that we as an organisation are, when we say we're listening to residents, we mean we're listening. We don't send responses that simply say we're reviewing the policy, we're already doing this, we're already doing that. That's not what it's about. We know what we're already doing. It's how are we going to improve the service directly in the short term to abide by that person's complaint. Adding a complaint to an already large list of responses to a consultation is not a response. It's a failure to respond. So I wish that Tom was here to talk more about Brilliant Basics, but alas, not. So some general comments to go back to Cabinet there.
Anyone else got any comments? Councillor Hooper?
So I'm just going to endorse what Councillor Goodjohn said, and actually just reflect on the fact that this requires a political response. This is about political leadership of this council. There's nothing that I would disagree with anything that he said there. I think it is a concerning set of indices that we're looking at. And I wonder whether the executive leader is on the call and would care to comment on it. I don't know. Or is another member of Cabinet on the call?
Any other comments? Tony, I've just got a couple more in regards to like the whistleblowing. I'm just wondering whether it's too data rich. We've got information going back to 2014, 15, and we're up to 20, 23-24. So I'm just wondering whether a lot of the appendices could be put in some background papers, and I don't know whether they actually add any value to the report. So I've just got, if you could just look at that again, maybe with Vicky when you go through. And picking up the point that Councillor Goodjohn made, the unfortunate thing is your team's at the end of the sausage machine here. And if you actually look at the table, the largest amount of Ombudsman's complaints that went last year are about complaints handling. 21 is the figure, which is the largest figure in the Vale de Morgan's table, 19 then being housing. I can't see anyone else. Environment and environmental health 3. And I should imagine the problem is a lot of those complaints you were dealing with relate to waste and other issues. So, but you get the thin end of the wedge in some respects in regards to dealing with that. And I think, as Councillor Goodjohn said, there does need to be a discussion with the directorates in regards to, how these matters are dealt with, and they do take some responsibility for it. I think it's not right and proper that you take that flack when it actually most probably comes from service directorates and the responses that some of the managers and that give. So so that's my comments made there. Are there any other comments? No? Okay, the recommendations then, if we go to the recommendations, if I go quickly. Is that we note the contents of the report and the Appendix A, Annual Complaints and Competence Report, that we continue to receive an annual update in relation to corporate complaints and compliments, and 3, that we refer the report and comments of the committee to Cabinet for consideration. Now, there's a significant amount of comments to be referred to Cabinet, and if Gareth could pick those up when they go forward and capture what has been made today. Anything else, anyone? Okay. Okay, someone move the recommendations, please. Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Seconded, Councillor Goodjohn. Are there anyone against? No, thank you, that's carried. Next item on the agenda is Quarter 2 Update Audit Wales Work Programme 24, Vale de Morgan Council. Now, is that Sam? It is Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this is the latest Audit Wales Work Programme update. Unfortunately, my financial audit colleagues couldn't be here today, so I'll give a very quick update on their behalf. So basically, the 23-24 accounts audit has been done. It was certified on the 6th of December. But apparently we are counting it as meeting the November target because it was basically just a few days out of date, and the issue was apparently caused by council meeting dates. Work is being finished on the shared regulatory service audit and the limited assurance review of the regional adoption collaborative, and no real issues to report on either at this stage. And the housing benefit work is still ongoing. So if I can then move to the performance audit work. So basically from the 23-24 work programme, just that one project remaining to be completed, and that is our thematic review of commissioning. And my understanding is that the draft report has been issued and it is currently going through clearance processes with officers. So that will bring the 23-24 work programme to a close. Then 24-25. On the performance side, we have the assurance and risk assessment work. This is still ongoing. We have a meeting scheduled with the senior leadership team on the 5th of February. And the purpose of that will be to discuss and share our findings and discuss potential areas for future audit work. The other project, local project review of complaints, we're currently scoping this. So we intend to start delivery of that in February and March of this year. And then finally, our local project setting of wellbeing objectives, that work is currently underway. Then very briefly, the local government studies, just to say that the capital planning work, the scope of this is being discussed with representatives from the Society of Welsh Treasurers. And we also wanted to make you aware of a change to this programme. Previously, we were looking to do some work on financial constraints and discretionary local government services. We are now considering a piece of work on children's services. We're currently scoping that piece of work, and we're under discussion with lots of work going on with other stakeholders. So we will formally communicate the change as soon as we understand what this will be, and that will probably be in our next work programme update. Then also with flagging, we have published, as Matt alluded to earlier in this meeting, our national report on financial sustainability. But we have also updated our local government financial sustainability data tool. So that is available currently on our website. Also, we have a good practice exchange event on the 30th of January. This being held in Cardiff, the cost of failure in governance and financial management. So this is following from the Auditor General's report, which he published in January of last year now. All potential attendees can actually sign up to attend this on our website. And one last thing, we published our last report on the National Fraud Initiative in Wales, and that was published in October. But just to let you know that we do now have an NFI self-appraisal checklist, which has been updated and is now published on our webpage. The checklist is available for all participating bodies, so hopefully that will have some usefulness. So that was my update for today. So were there any questions, Chair?
Any questions? I've got a little question in regards to the local project work for 24-25, which is the review of complaints. Can you tell me what is the council arrangements for working with schools to help address school balances to do with complaints?
Sorry, Chair, I'll have another look at the update. Maybe there was a typo.
On page 4 on the bottom.
That is a mistake. That shouldn't be there. That is actually part of our audit and assurance work. So that should not be in there. Good question.
That's okay. And the other one is, obviously, there's going to be a change of the local government national studies. What's the reason behind changing the discretionary local government services one to children's services? Because there's a huge issue about discretionary local government services and the impact and consequences on other areas which it supports. Leisure service is a discretionary service. You don't have to write leisure services, but the impact on health would be phenomenal. So I'm just wondering, is there any rationale around why it's been changed?
Only that as a result of all of the work that we do based on our assurance and risk assessment work and other more specialist work within our health and social care team, it's simply based on our internal assessment of priorities. Okay.
All right. Obviously, we can't change that, but, you know, discretionary services has a huge impact. You know, we were just discussing sustainability and the earlier report in financial sustainability, discretionary services. You know, you've got to fund lots of these things because the consequence on other service agencies would be enormous if they were cut. So, no, I understand that. Thank you very much. Okay. Any comments? No, the recommendations are that we note the contents of the report and that we refer the report to Cabinet for their oversight. Someone prepared to move? Thank you. Councillor Goodjohn, seconded by Councillor Hooper. Anyone against? No, thank you very much. The next one is I think that's you finished, Sam, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for staying. If you can stay further, if you wish. Next one
I
is...
will shortly leave. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. Is proposal to amend the minimum revenue provision 24-25 policy. Obviously, this has come back to us with a little bit more information, and I should imagine it's Gemma. Yeah, Gemma.
Hello, good afternoon, Chair. So, yeah, absolutely, members. And committee will recall that we brought proposals for a change to the minimum revenue provision policy. And obviously, it's not just for 24-25, the proposal is going forward as well, back in October last year. So just as a reminder, the council is required to make prudent provisions in the council's revenue budget for the cost of the borrowing it undertakes to finance the capital programme. There are a few different categories of borrowing, and these proposals impact the supported borrowing that the council undertakes, which is part of the council's general capital funding allocation from Welsh Government each year. And there's a revenue stream to finance this included in the council's AEF. There were a few concerns outlined in the committee and a bit more information that was requested. So we have provided a little bit more information as part of this report, but we've also slightly amended the proposals, which we hope will alleviate some of the concerns that were raised in committee, because I think some of the concerns around the kind of future value of the capital programme, the types of schemes we were going to be undertaking are potentially valid. So there's some additional information that was requested in terms of what other Welsh councils are doing in respect of their MRP policy, and that's now included in Appendix 2 of the report. And we did include some additional years of analysis. So we've included a forward projection for 24-25. And having considered that and the kind of 5-year programme that we're currently pulling together in draft form, we proposed an amendment to the MRP policy proposals. So I think having considered the increased cost of delivering schemes and the strain on council's budgets, it's likely that the schemes delivered will be predominantly of a kind of asset maintenance and road resurfacing nature, so potentially with a slightly shorter life than we've seen in some of the previous years in the programme. Although we do have some significant schemes in the programme across Sustainable Communities for Learning and some of those major schemes, such as the Penarth Land scheme, which will have longer lives. So the amended policy proposals would suggest that outstanding supported borrowing incurred up to the end of March 2025 uses a straight line calculation of 50 years. And then from the 1st of April 2025, we would use an appropriate life based on the nature of the schemes funded from general capital funding in each year, and we would kind of set that in the February prior to the 31st of March year end each year. So for 25-26, we will be setting that in February 2026, although obviously we'll be able to set an indication based on the capital programme. And this would enable the council to match the provision to the type of schemes being funded and the associated benefits to the budget. So obviously, the ideal scenario is that the provision that you're making in the revenue budget matches the benefit that you're seeing in the council's budget for those assets over their life as it's used up. So an example of a Welsh council that already adopts this approach is Denbighshire, and there are a number of other authorities that operate a similar approach, but they calculate their contributions on an annuity basis. We have consulted on these proposals with the council's Treasury Management Advisors link, and we have proposed to adopt the asset life as at February each year, because we do tend to have quite a lot of switching to maximise the use of grants and general capital funding, but we also need to be mindful of the time taken to close the loan pool and make sure that that doesn't hold us up in terms of closing the accounts and the revenue accounts each year. Should these proposals be progressed, they'll be reflected in a revised Treasury Management Strategy to present to Cabinet on the 27th of February and Council on the 10th of March 2025. So those are the main points on the report, but I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Gemma. Questions? There aren't any questions. Comments? There aren't any comments. If we go to the recommendations then, that we recommend to Council the approval of the proposed amendment to the minimum revenue provision policy for 24-25 for supported borrowing. Someone prepared to move, please. Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Seconded by Councillor Goodjohn. Anyone against? Nope, that's carried. Thank you, Gemma. Item 10, Governance and Audit Decision Tracker 24-25.
Shall I take this,
Gareth,
Chair? I'll
yes.
be extremely brief because there's not much in this report. Just to advise members that back in September there was a request for a decision track and record to be implemented. We've devised something and that's attached to Appendix A, Chair, so that includes all resolutions made for this year, 2024-25 so far. We also attached to Appendix B a slight update for 3 limited assurance audits. These relate to debtors, food stock control in residential homes and the leisure centres, contract and performance management, Chair. So that's all I wish to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Gareth. Any questions? Councillor John.
Can I just ask here, as was an opportunity to before, to just ask about the audited statement of accounts in the meeting in November? We haven't had an update regarding information to do with the timeline with the potential overpayments. I don't believe we got anything afterwards from that. So if we could get that, that would be helpful.
Did a memo, a note came out?
I think something came from Tom.
From Tom Billring?
I will double check then. That's my fault probably for not seeing it. I do apologise.
Any other questions? Any comments? Now, can I just say, Gareth, thank you and your team for doing this. I know it's something that we've been asking for a little considerable time, but obviously it takes a lot of time to put this all together. And I'd like to thank you for doing this first draft. It's really appreciated. I think those matters where we've completed, I think, can be left off. And it's great to have it originally, you know, as to what the recommendations were or the resolutions were. And if we can continue that, that would be great. If you could go back to when we sort of start, that would be even better. But hopefully we completed all those back in 22, 23, 23, 24. But thank you very much for doing this. Greatly appreciated.
So just checking, Chair, should I go back to when, to 2022?
If you could, I think then at least we pick up everything then that the committee's made resolutions about. If they've been completed, then maybe the next one just puts completed, and if there are any outstanding matters, then we can address those.
Yeah, and just on an ongoing update, is quarterly sufficient, Chair?
Yeah, that should be okay. But again, only matters outstanding. Is that okay? But thank you very much for that. Okay, the recommendations is that we note the contents of the decision tracker contained in Appendix A and request regular updates on any outstanding decision resolutions. So we pick those up on a quarterly basis. And again, the contents Appendix B, the updates for the 3 limited assurance audits, debtors, residential home, food stock control, leisure centre, contract performance be noted. Obviously, that may increase as we go forward, and some will drop off as we go forward. So, someone prepared to move, please. Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Do you find it? Thank you. Yeah. Anyone against? No, that's carried. Thank you very much. Item 11 then is progress against the internal audit risk-based plan. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This is one of the regular reports that the internal audit team bring to Governance and Audit Committee, so hopefully members will be familiar with the format. It's in relation to the progress against the plan and the opinions which we've issued in terms of the work that we've completed. The team have set internal targets, which are set out on 2.2 on a quarterly basis. The data provided to you today is in relation to data as at the 31st of October, which was the most up-to-date we had at the December meeting as planned. Shows that we've completed 39% of the plan, which is in excess of quarter two's target of 30%. And table 1 at 2.3 shows we've issued 17 final reports, 5 draft reports, which gives our percentage. But also for committee to note, we've got 16 jobs in progress as at that time. So things are moving well in terms of completion of the audit plan as at quarter 2. We also issue opinions, as you are well aware, of the 21 audits which we've issued an opinion for. That's set out in table 2. Positive opinions overall, with 8 substantial, 11 reasonable, and 2 limited, and no assurance opinions, which is a good place to be. For reference, description of the opinions which we use are noted at 2.5. And in terms of the limited assurance opinions, members are already aware of the one report, tender evaluation and award follow-up in building services, project and plan team services. As committee have invited the head of service along for an update. The other one, the ICT business continuity follow-up audit, is currently in draft, and further information will be reported when we finalise that report, Chair. As the committee have now acknowledged, where we've got a limited assurance opinion, we have a process in place that we will go to a follow-up audit within 6 to 12 months of the final report being issued and report back to committee accordingly. Where we have a second consecutive limited assurance opinion, then the advice will be to call in the respective director and head of service to provide you with assurances that moving forward improvements will be made and acknowledge that there were issues or weaknesses which needed to be identified. What we've also provided in the report, Chair, is an update on the 23-24 plan, where we didn't complete all of the jobs which we intended to. That's set out in table 3 of paragraph 2.10. We've completed 50% of those, with many of the audits still in progress. We've issued 71 recommendations to date, 4 high priority, 30 medium priority and 37 low priority, details of which will be covered in the second report we'll present this afternoon to you, Chair. So very briefly, Appendix A gives you an overall picture of where we are against the plan. That's all the jobs within our plan and the status with a respective opinion, number of recommendations made. We've summarised the number of reports issued and the status in Appendix B, along with the opinions issued and the respective percentages. And we've also put a percentage against the high, medium and low recommendations. And you can see from the opinions that we've issued, generally they are positive. 90% of our opinions are positive. So the intention of that, Chair, is to make sure we focus on the key issues moving forward, and we'll bring the key issues to your attention in future reports. Appendix C outlines the information on 23-24 as already described. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Any questions? Councillor?
Thanks, Andrew. And just a brief one, really. I'm just interested in, so we're obviously quite a long way down from Q2, which these figures are relating to. How close are we to getting to the 80% now? With I noticed in this report there were 11 that weren't allocated. Have they been allocated subsequently? Thank you.
So this information provides you with data as at the 31st of October, which was 39%. So we're kind of on track for the target. Target for the end of December was 50%. So we haven't collected that information yet. We'll be doing that in the next 2 weeks. So we'll be able to give you a better picture when we report back in February. What we'll also do is if we're unlikely to achieve the 80%, we'll give you a reason why.
Any other questions? No, you answered my question because I was going to ask where are we now, given Q3, but if we got not, yeah, because we've not got the information and obviously only just come back to work. So yeah, no, that's okay. We look forward to the report in March anyway. Okay, any other questions? No, any comments? No. Okay, recommendation is that we note the content of the report and the progress made against the internal audit risk-based plan 24-25. Someone move, please. Thank you, Councillor Burke. Can I have a seconder? Councillor John. Oh, Nigel. Oh, thank you. Anyone against? Nope, that's it. Next item, 12, recommendation monitoring. Joan.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Again, the purpose of this report is to provide members of the committee with a position statement on the internal audit recommendations made, implemented and overdue as at the 31st of October 2024. And as committee members are familiar with, Appendix A provides the detail of the high and the medium priority recommendations made at that date. As you're all aware, recommendations are made at the conclusion of an audit review if it is felt that improvements should be made to mitigate risk and strengthen controls. The implementation of these are monitored to ensure that the identified risk has been addressed. Within the report, Table 1 sets out the recommendation categorisations used, and Table 2 within the report summarises the recommendation status in respect of the audits completed from the 24-25 audit plan. It's illustrated that a total of 34 recommendations have been made as of October the 31st, 14 have been implemented and 20 have a future target date. Table 3, however, shows recommendation status of audits completed prior to this financial year. The table shows that 2 recommendations made in 22-23 still have a future target date. These relate to the local authority trading company audit, and the detailed current position of these recommendations are included at Appendix C. Table 3 also shows that there's 1 overdue medium priority recommendation. This is in respect of the Officer Code of Conduct audit completed in November 2023. Details of this recommendation and the current status is at Appendix B. As you're all aware, the monitoring of the recommendations is undertaken regularly by the audit team, and there is a robust process. Any undue delays or issues are highlighted to the senior leadership team and ultimately reported to this committee. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions, anyone? Councillor Goodjohn?
Yeah, can I just ask about the building services tender follow-up audit, if we can get any more information on that and the recommendations, the limited assurance there, 24-25, because it's another audit which we've seen limited assurance in procurement services, and this continues to be a highlighted feature within the council, and we have the task and finish group occurring with procurement. So if we can get more information, perhaps to the task and finish as well, would be extremely helpful.
I can give a short update on that. We've worked with the service on the way in which they procure in the future. So there's been a workshop hosted by, supported by Ardle, and having a number of the team members present, and that was before Christmas. And they're currently working through with the team how to go out and procure a long-term contract that will provide for a number of drawdowns of individual pieces of work. So I'm really happy with the progress that's been made on addressing that. I think when the team do eventually go out and re-audit that, I think we'll be seeing quite a turnaround in the way in which that's being managed.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? I've got 2, Joan. In regards to the Officer Code of Conduct, the Appendix B timetable gave an agreed date of the 30th of August 2024, which is now nearly 5 months out of time. Do we have any explanation why they've not dealt with this? Because again, time is again of the essence, and this is just rumbled on again.
This was discussed at the last SLT meeting that we went to, and I think the issue is with the new starters that haven't got online access, and although we're not saying they're not having that code of conduct, it's actually demonstrating that those staff are being reached and are receiving those policies. So it's a conversation how we're capturing that information to demonstrate that that is in place. So I am speaking to the relevant officers, and we're hoping for more up-to-date information for the next meeting.
Because I think that's quite interesting, because if they're not getting it because they haven't got access to the electronic system, then they're not getting it in regards to whistleblowing. They're not getting it in regards to other policies and procedures. So it's a bigger issue than the Code of Conduct. The Code of Conduct. It's an issue in regards to all policies and procedures of the council, and I think it does need to be addressed. We've had the whistleblowing report that says 92% of the council employees are fully aware of it. So I assume since 2023 November till now, all the new starters won't be aware of it because they can't get access to it. And if you started in November 23 and still not fully aware of the policies, then I think there's an issue there to be addressed. I don't know whether anyone else agrees, but that would give me some concern, and I think it needs to be addressed as soon as possible.
Actually, yeah, I agree with that, and I agree with in terms of the policies as well. It's access retrospectively. So we have been given assurances that all new starters do receive the documentation. What we obviously need to do is evidence that. So that's where the gap is at the moment, is evidencing retrospectively that all staff who've not got access to the digital system have in fact received the appropriate documentation.
That can't be right, can it? All staff not having access to the digital system. Okay, I can understand maybe some of the workers who are out and about on a day-to-day basis, you know, maybe the refuge collectors or park workers or whatever, but certainly office-based staff. Can we get the head of HR to come in and address it?
Those exceptions that you've just given, the refuse workers and those workers out in the field, those are almost uniquely the people that we're talking about. We're not talking about office-based people here at all.
Right, okay, so we may most probably need to address the director as to how he inducts his members of staff. But again, it is a corporate issue, isn't it, for the head of HR to put in a policy in place as to how they deal with it. When you're going back in to have a look at that, Andrew, do you know?
It's on our plan. We're aware we do follow up the recommendations on a regular basis, feed into SLT on a regular basis. Until that's been achieved and implemented, then there's no point going back in and has tested it.
Can we have the head of human resources and organisational development and operational manager life cycle to come to the next committee? People, yeah, okay. The other one is this, which I don't understand, but is PCI-DSS follow up. It's a limited again. 21st of September 2023. There were 3 medium recommendations. Only one have been one has been implemented. Can someone just explain to me what that's about? Because I don't understand what PCI DSS is. So,
One of us can have a go. It is quite technical. Do you want to first go, Joan, or shall I say? Shall I have a go? It's about, some of this is around how we take cash payments as a system and the security of those systems that we're using, and the majority of the council systems are fine. Where some of the problems are, where we're taking money over a phone call, over the phone, and the confidentiality of that. But there are those systems are across the council. There are a number of different owners, and there's a workshop currently planned for this month between all of them to resolve it and take the issue forward. But it's a pretty technical one, and it's quite difficult to resolve.
Has council got a policy on it then in regards to how they should take, presumably it's credit card payments or debit card payments, or I doubt if you accept cash anymore, I don't know. But, you know, I don't know, because we haven't got that in the report. I don't think we've had it before in the schedules. It's been up before as to what the recommendations was and who's actually taking accountability and responsibility for it. Because I understand it's difficult, Matt, but someone needs to be accountable and responsible for putting in place, you know, cash is a nightmare in any organisation. If it goes missing, you know, there are real issues. So I'm just wondering whether someone can provide us with an update. I don't know whether that would be your team, Andrew, or someone can explain what the real issue is in regards to PCI DSS.
Sorry, Chair, yeah. In terms of limited reports, the summary has been provided into committee previously.
Right.
So there's an overview of why we felt it was
I missed that then.
It's in the it should be in the papers, but
Okay.
we can provide more details if.
Can we just pick that up and what the target dates were?
Yeah.
And you know why it hasn't been addressed, because you know finance is a big issue, isn't it? Really.
Absolutely, and there's a standard industry compliance which needs to be addressed in terms of.
Oh, and we're not compliant, are we?
No.
Is that what you're saying?
No, but not many local authorities are because of the complexities.
That doesn't make it right, though,
I accept.
does it?
I think it's one of those things that is, it's almost like a pass and fail. You can have 99% of this in place, and if you've not got that last 1%, if there's just one area of the business where you're taking such payments and it doesn't comply, then
You've got to fail.
You fail the test.
It would be nice to know what it means, though, Matt, isn't it? Because I, with all respect, I haven't got an understand. I don't know whether any other members have got an understanding of it, but I haven't got an understanding of it. And I think I need to, given that you're saying we're not complying, and I hope the committee would accept that we need to have an understanding of it. Yeah.
We'll do that, Chair.
Lovely. Nigel?
Yeah, it was only just to come in quickly. PCI DSS is the payment card industry data security standards. And normally organisations fall down where they take card payments over the phone and you record the phone call for quality purposes and end up recording the security details from the cards over the phone or on an online payment. So it's normally organisations will not comply because they're holding the security code, the 3-digit number. Now, I don't know that definitely for the council's purposes, but that's normally where organisations fall down. And obviously that usually entails changing a whole load of software to enable it to work. So I can't say for definite, but I'd put money on, a small amount of money, on the fact that that may be the case, but it would be useful for an update.
Thank you for that, Nigel, but don't do it over the phone, because that could cause us issues. And thank you for explaining what it actually means here. So, but I think if we just have a quick update, and again, there's going to be a cost to this if it needs to comply, isn't there? So I think I'd rather know what the issue, well, I would hope the committee would rather know what the issue is so we can address it elsewhere. You know, you may need budget for it, mightn't you, rather than let it run. Okay, any comments? No. The recommendation then is that we note the position statement on the internal audit recommendations made, implemented outstanding as at the 31st of August 2024. We consider the information provided in regards to the status of the high and medium priority recommendations by the Regional Internal Audit Service. And 2, that we ask that the head of whatever this very long title is, the head of human resources and organisational development and operational manager life cycle. I presume that's 2 people, is it? Yeah, okay. Come to the next meeting and just explain what the issues are in regards to the implementing the code of conduct and the electronic access. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Seconder, Councillor Hooper. Thank you. And anyone against? No, thank you. Item 13, counter fraud policies.
Thank you, Chair. So this report in front of you is to bring members up to date on the counter fraud policies and where we are with them. So one of the core functions of an effective Governance and Audit Committee is to consider the effectiveness of the Council's risk management arrangements, the control environment and associated anti-fraud and corruption policies. So the Council's counter-fraud strategy and framework is integral to this, and the previous 3-year strategy has now been refreshed, and that's included at Appendix A. The document sets out the roles and responsibilities, including employees, councillors and service users, and highlights the fraud landscape and fraud risks. Page 14 of the document, that's page 220 of your pack, sets out the steps the Council proposed to take over the medium term to further its resilience. There's 9 steps listed, and the progress of these will be monitored and included within the annual fraud report, which is brought to this committee. The strategy also includes information in respect of reporting fraud, and Appendix 1 includes a fraud response plan. Supporting the strategy included at Appendix B to E are the key policies: the corporate fraud enforcement policy, the anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy, the anti-money laundering policy and the anti-tax evasion policy. These policies all drive the commitment to developing a culture of honesty, integrity and opposition to fraud, bribery and corruption. These have been reviewed and refreshed to reflect any legislative changes or working practices, but no significant changes have been made to these policies that need to be highlighted to yourselves. They've purely been refreshed on that basis. That's all I'd like to say, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Any questions, anyone? Councillor Goodjohn?
Yeah, just very briefly, can I ask that in future, when there have been changes, can you just highlight the sentences that have been changes for ease of reference? I think everything is fine that I can see from my reading of it. It seems to be all with legislation I'm aware of, so I'm satisfied. But just in future, so I don't have to go through a whole process of directly finding which ones have changed.
I think it'd be useful just putting the tracked changed document in, showing all the changes that have been made, so it makes it a lot easier. And then if committee agrees it, you just say accept all the changes, don't you? I think that's the way to deal with it. Andrew?
Actually, we'll certainly take that on board, but we just need to be mindful of how many track changes are in each document. We don't want it to look too messy, so we'll concentrate on just the key changes, if that's okay.
As long as it's highlighted where the wording has changed, then that's fine if you only list the significant changes that make any kind of impact on the policy. Yeah.
Andrew, if you worked as a lawyer, you'd have a document which contained red ink, green ink, purple ink, which showed all the changes made at different stages throughout the document. So, yeah, that's okay. The only question I was going to ask, Joan, when we did the Wales Audit Office report, there was this reference to the National Fraud Initiative survey and the report, and that has all that been incorporated in this document if it needed to be? Because she said there was a checklist, I think Sam said, didn't she?
The checklist will be referred to because there's a new match just come out, so we will use that as a working document. But as far as the National Fraud Initiative, that's key to the fraud coverage, and it is within the strategy and within the action points.
I just wanted to make sure it's been picked up in the document.
Yeah. We're responsible as an internal audit team for coordinating the NFI.
Any other questions? Any comments? No, the recommendation is that having reviewed the Council's updated counter-fraud policy, including the Council's counter-fraud strategy and framework, we recommend it for approval to Cabinet. Someone move, please. Councillor Hooper, seconded Councillor Goodjohn. Anyone against? No, thank you. Item 14, forward work programme. Joan?
Thank you, Chair. So this is agenda item 14 is the usual forward work programme report to provide members with an updated forward work programme. So this enables your committee to ensure it covers a range of responsibilities as per the terms of reference. So Appendix A is familiar to yourselves. It's the updated forward work programme. The proposed agenda prior to this meeting was is there within the context of the report for the 17th of February 2025, and obviously there's been some additional items which you can add following this meeting. Thank you.
Any questions, Councillor Hooper?
I'm just so pleased that we've got a Cardiff Capital Region to turn up to one of our meetings, and I look forward to that immensely. I just wonder, Chair, as you work through the preparation for that meeting, do we know what they are coming to present? I'm hopeful that they will be able to talk to us about their accounts and allow us to interrogate those accounts and talk through those accounts.
It's a shame Matt's now rushed off. I agree with you. I think we ought to get an agenda from them as to what they're going to discuss before the meeting, so that can be circulated to members. And if there are any specific issues they'd like to have addressed, that we go back to them and ask for that. So I'm just wondering whether we can ask the Capital Region to send us an agenda within the next 2 weeks as to what they're going to address, and that we will go back to them. If we circulate that to members of the committee, and then we can go back to them and say, look, you know, thank you for the agenda. That covers everything we want to discuss, or there may be additional items.
Just to add, there's a column, frequency column on this thing. I think annually would be a great point to put alongside Cardiff Capital Region, if we could. If you know, we're so agreed.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't say yearly, because I'd be asking which year, you know, because I'm glad they're coming. Well, they're not here yet. That's the first thing, but hopefully in the spirit of collaboration that they will come along and, you know, address the committee. Okay, obviously we've got the head of service and the operational manager for HR. Don't know whether there's anything else we've got coming in as well. Yeah, Andrew.
Thanks, Chair. If I could just add that all our reports reference the public sector internal audit standards from April 1st, 2025. They'll now represent the global internal audit standards, which come into practice for the public sector in the UK. Global standards come into practice from the 1st of January. So I'll be bringing a presentation to committee in February just to give you an overview of the changes and the new global standard.
I was going to say, are we going to be briefed on it? But, you know, hopefully that's not going to take an hour or so, Andrew, is it? Because we've got Cardiff Capital Region coming in. That's going to take at least 2 hours, I should imagine. By the time Councillor Hoop was finished.
Certainly not, Chair.
Okay. Okay. Obviously, we've got those issues coming forward. So the recommendations are we note the forward work programme, and secondly, that we endorse the schedule of items for the next meeting on 17th of February. And obviously, the list of people we would like to invite has been set out in regards to the head of HR and whatever is manager, life cycle. Andrew's going to do a marvellous presentation. I don't know whether we actually ought to put your presentation on first. And then we have Cardiff Capital Region second. Let's get them dealt with and then put the rest of the business after.
So, yeah, Chair, normally we do presentations top of the agenda.
Yeah, if we do Andrews and then Cardiff Capital Region. Yeah, and then we do the agenda items. Okay, someone move that recommendation. Sorry, thank you, Councillor John, seconded. Councillor Hooper, anyone object? No, thank you, that's carried. Item 15, there are any other items? There aren't any under part 1. Part 2, there aren't any items, and there aren't any items that I've decided are urgent. Can I just thank everyone for attending the committee this evening, for the contributions made, and see you all on the 17th of September. The meeting's now closed.